Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, May 16th. And tonight, we begin with President Vladimir Putin's response to an expanding NATO alliance. The Russian leader says his country doesn't have a problem with Sweden or Finland applying to join NATO, but he says Moscow will react to any military expansion in those countries. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says Canada's goal is to be among the first countries to ratify the two countries' admission. Separately, the Russian Defense Ministry has announced there has been a local ceasefire agreement which would allow for injured Ukrainian troops to leave the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol for medical treatment. Back here at home, Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault is launching the final development phase for a national strategy on adapting to climate change. Experts say Canada needs to do more to prepare infrastructure for the threats of extreme weather. And it needs to get faster at helping Canadians recover from floods, fires, and major storms. The plan is supposed to show how Canada can become more resilient to the effects of climate change and include a national monitoring and evaluation system. All of this comes as Manitoba's premier says dry weather is what the province needs after she toured flooded areas north and south of Winnipeg in a helicopter yesterday. Heather Stephenson, her transportation minister, and the leader of the opposition all took part in the flight. She noted that some regions have seen the floodwaters crest, but the province's Hydrologic Forecast Center has issued an overland flood warning for western Manitoba and eastern Saskatchewan, with close to 75 millimeters of rain expected. Turning to the housing market now, the Canadian Real Estate Association says rising mortgage rates and buyer fatigue actually cooled home sales sharply last month. This is compared to the frenzied pace at the start of the year. CREA says home sales last month were down 12.7% from March and 25.7% from the same month last year. But the actual national average home price was still up 7.4% from a year earlier. Meanwhile, manufacturing sales rose 2.5% to $70.2 billion in March. This was led by gains in the petroleum and coal product industry. Sales in that sector increased 9.1%. Sales of primary metals rose 6.5% to a record $5.8 billion. Voters in Canada's largest province will get a chance to see the four major party leaders in action tonight in the only official debate of the election campaign. Last week, Progressive Conservative leader Doug Ford, the Liberal Stephen Del Duca, NDP leader Andrea Horwath, and Green Party leader Mike Schreiner took part in a separate event which was focused on issues affecting Northern Ontario. The action gets underway at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. On the West Coast, British Columbia is set to launch one-stop centers for children with issues like ADHD, autism, and Down syndrome. However, some parents say that they're worried about how the new system will work without a referral, assessment, or diagnosis. Children's Minister Mitzi Dean says parents can bring their kids to a center when they notice certain milestones are being missed. 4 so-called hubs will open in BC next year, and about 40 are scheduled to be operating in 2 years. All right, turning to a new study published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. It looks into what led to some hospitalized COVID-19 patients to be readmitted within a month of discharge. Co-author Dr. Finlay McAllister of the University of Alberta says returning patients tend to be male, older, and have multiple comorbidities. Previous hospital visits and admissions. He says a scoring system was used by hospitals to predict readmission, and it was more accurate when it included a patient's sex and socioeconomic background. A clinic in Montreal has received Health Canada approval to treat depression with psilocybin, the hallucinogenic compound found in some mushrooms. Earlier this year, Health Canada restored a program that allowed healthcare experts to request access to restricted drugs that have not yet been authorized for sale in the country. Quebec's health insurance plan doesn't cover the treatment. Well, in case you missed the Juno Awards, Toronto rapper Havaya Mighty made history as the first woman to win the Rap Album or EP of the Year. Miss Mighty's 2021 album Stock Exchange picked up the prize. Her rise on the Canadian rap scene has been steady since she was named the winner of the 2019 Polaris Music Prize. One of Canada's most celebrated Second World War fighter aces has died at the age of 100. James Stocky Edwards of Comox, BC, had 19 confirmed aerial victories. He was Canada's most prolific ace in the Western Desert campaign in North Africa. Stay with us. We have more news from around the world, but first a look at how to save on gas mileage. Stay with us. Even as gas prices are hitting record highs, Canadians are fanning out across the country for fresh travel experiences after 2 years of bottled up demand. The head of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada says some vacationers are still staying closer to home on camping, hiking, and cycling excursions, while others opt for road trips over pricey plane tickets. This comes as fuel costs and inflation loom larger. Well, with the weather only expected to get better as we get closer to a busy season, how can Canadians enjoy the summer without breaking the bank on fuel? The Canadian Automobile Association's Teresa DeFelice joins us now to give us some advice for boosting your mileage and saving cash at the pumps. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me.
So we know Canadians really want to get out there and enjoy the summer months, but with these gas prices hitting record highs, how can they save money on fuel during long road trips?
Well, there's a couple of things that you can do with inside your vehicle and around your vehicle that might be able to just help create better fuel efficiency while driving your vehicle. And this can go from habits like how you brake and how you get going again from when you're stopped at a light or whatnot, to thinking about not idling. There's so many tips, so I'm happy to delve into them.
Yes, definitely. Let's talk a little bit more about the advice when it comes to braking and starting your car, especially at stoplights.
Yeah, so what we recommend is kind of go slow into both the brake or as you're coming out of being stopped, and just to be easy on both the gas and the brake pedal. The further back that you can brake instead of slamming on those brakes, the more fuel efficient and less emissions that your is how your car will react. And same with sort of that get to the go start, right? If you can ease into it, anticipate the light's going to change, but obviously be safe. That little habit of just your own behavior within, your car driving makes a big difference.
And what about on highways, on those really long road trips? Are there kind of steps that Canadians can take to save on gas in that scenario?
Yes, I mean, we recommend, speeding is a bit of a challenge because you're on the highway and you obviously want to go the speed limit, and many people tend to go a little bit over the speed limit. But your vehicle actually tops up in terms of fuel efficiency between 80 and 90 kilometers an hour. So the more that you go over 90 kilometers an hour, the more that you are going to use up in fuel. And so our recommendation is obviously watch your speed, try and stay at or below the speed limit as much as possible. If the conditions are safe, it's not raining hard or anything like that, get into the habit of using cruise control. You'd be surprised at how that car's ability to keep that steady pace will actually feel quite nice and not this need for speed. We're in our cars too. They're so comfortable. We almost don't always recognize the speeds that we're going at. But if you can keep your speed pretty reasonable, use your cruise control so that you're not sort of revving up or winding down, that will help with the fuel efficiency.
And meanwhile, as it warms up outside, we know Canadians are going to start using their air conditioners. So how can they save on gas-fueled air conditioning?
Yeah, so one of the things that we recommend at CAA is, don't run your car, don't idle. And part of that is we tend to do that, especially now with the hot weather. Your car's been sitting for a while. You want to get that air conditioning on and going. Our recommendation is for you to put your windows down to sort of push that hot air out. And if you can, for sort of lower speed driving, like city driving, try and use your windows as down. It makes sense to use your air conditioning to keep cool. And another aspect of, even if you are using them in the city or on the highway, some cars that come equipped with a max AC function. Try not to use your max AC function. Try to go a few temperature degrees below what your car would automatically set the temperature at. And this will actually help you as well, because air conditioning can impact your fuel efficiency. Some experts say up to 20%.
Some important information there. Now, just about a minute left here, Ms. DeFelice, but what other steps can Canadians take to save fuel in their tanks?
Well, especially if you're doing road trips, make sure you've had your car looked at and you're doing your car maintenance. We had not done a lot of driving over the winter. People are anxious to get going out and about. So get those oil changes and have those filters changed if you haven't done so. Checking your tire pressure, get into the habit of checking your tire pressure once a month, because overinflated and underinflated are not good and for your car safety and on gas as well.
Some great advice. Thank you again for joining us, Ms. DeFelice.
Take care.
Stay with us. Coming up after the break, we'll be taking an in-depth look at Canada's healthcare system. We'll be speaking to Ms. Susan Martinuk, author of Patients at Risk, Exposing Canada's Healthcare Crisis. We'll be discussing the massive backlog of patients awaiting health procedures and whether our healthcare system is equipped to handle our country's aging population. And of course, we'll have more news from around the world when we return from that. So stay with us. We'll be right back here only on Forum Daily. Stay tuned. A Nova Scotia doctor says the province's surgical backlog is likely to grow. Cardiac surgeon Dr. Greg Hirsch says doctors are diagnosing patients with diseases that have progressed significantly compared to what they saw before the pandemic. Dr. Hirsch says he expects wait times for surgery will be climbing because doctors are encountering more advanced disease. Meanwhile, across the country, many Canadians are struggling to find a family doctor as the pandemic leads to burnout. A new book by Susan Martinuk is taking a look at healthcare systems across Canada. Titled Patients at Risk, Exposing Canada's Healthcare Crisis, the book takes a look at the issues affecting health systems across the country. Well, with us now to discuss her book is Ms. Susan Martinuk herself. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, it's interesting how the pandemic highlighted issues within the healthcare system in Canada that were really underlying, that were there even before the pandemic was an issue. And you yourself have been quoted saying that Canada's healthcare system is one of the worst and most expensive in the world. So can you unpack this for us and tell us how your book really investigates the issues within Canada's healthcare system?
Sure. Well, it's not too difficult to unpack because the facts exist and the statistics exist, and they've existed for years to show that international studies that have been conducted by a number of groups, and as I say, over decades, have shown that Canada ranks in last place in terms of things such as numbers of beds, numbers of doctors, availability of specialists, availability of emergency departments. These statistics have been shown for years. And for some reason, Canadians still seem to believe that they have the best healthcare in the world. And that's just absolutely a myth. And another factor is that they don't realize that they're paying $7,000 a year in taxes for each person to support this healthcare system. And that's whether or not they use the system or not, which is a factor that many people forget when they talk about what happens if we have to pay for healthcare. Well, Canadians are already paying $7,000 a year for healthcare, whether or not they use it.
And as we mentioned, a lot of Canadians are actually struggling to find a doctor. And this was an issue even back in 2019, according to StatsCan. Almost 5 million of us were finding it difficult to find a family doctor. So what needs to be done to really address this issue?
That's right. It's probably about 15% of Canadians, and it goes up to as high as 25% of Canadians in several provinces cannot find a family doctor. And my book, in fact, carries a number of different stories in it from actual patients who, because they were not able to find a family doctor, they received very late diagnoses with cancer. They missed transplants. They even died because they did not have access to a family doctor. So it's a real problem, and it's one that, again, for some reason, politicians do not seem to address. Unfortunately, Canadian healthcare is tied deeply to politics, and so we are reliant on them to get things moving in the right direction. And by getting things in the right direction, one of the things is Ontario Premier Doug Ford recently announced that there are 450 new positions going to be opened in medical schools across the country. Canadian medical schools, their enrollments have been on the decline since the 1990s. And they've been the lowest of any developed country when you look at enrollments. So what we need to do is get more enrollments at medical schools. Then we also need to have jobs for them when they finish, and positions at hospitals that are ready, so that when after we invest in Canada, again, we're investing in these doctors over the number of years that they are in school, we are subsidizing it. And yet when they're done, we don't have enough positions that are open for them to take. So they go to another school, so they go to another country. And then we're responsible for bringing more people in by immigration and adding incentivizations to them to come and be doctors for us. So it's really a system that's very backwards.
Definitely something we need to address and investigate further. I wish I could ask you some more questions, ma'am, but we are out of time. Where can our viewers have access to your report?
They can get access to the book at amazon.ca. Just Google either my name or the name of the book, which is Patients at Risk.
All right, perfect, ma'am. Thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks very much. Take care.
All right, up next, we've got more news from around the world, starting with Sweden's decision to apply for NATO membership. We'll have that story and more coming up next. Sweden has avoided military alliances since the end of the Napoleonic Wars, but Russia's invasion of Ukraine has prompted it to apply for NATO membership. Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson is calling the decision a historic change in her country's security policy. Finland made a similar announcement yesterday. South of our border, police are investigating a racist ideology called the Great Replacement Theory. They think it might be a motivating factor in Saturday's supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York. Most of the 10 people killed and 3 wounded were Black. The conspiracy theory says there's a plot to diminish the influence of white people through the immigration of non-white people. An Associated Press poll released last week found that about 1/3 of Americans surveyed believe an effort is underway to replace people born in the U.S. with immigrants for electoral gain. All right, moving to Israel now, where the top Catholic clergyman is accusing police of violating human rights and disrespecting the Catholic Church. Latin Patriarch Pier Battista Pizzaballa is condemning the police's beating of pallbearers carrying the casket of Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh on Friday. He says it was a disproportionate use of force. The attack drew worldwide condemnation and added to the shock and outrage of Ms. Abu Akleh's killing as she covered a shootout in the occupied West Bank. Israel and the Palestinians are locked in a war of narratives over Ms. Abu Akleh's killing, with each claiming the other was responsible. Violence also continues to plague Somalia, and U.S. President Joe Biden has signed an order to send troops into the country to fight extremist rebels. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin requested the deployment because the al-Shabaab group has increased in strength and poses a heightened threat. Late in his presidency, Donald Trump pulled out nearly all 700 U.S. Special Operations Forces in Somalia. A powerful symbol of the thawing of Cold War tensions is about to close up shop in Russia. McDonald's is preparing to sell its Russian business, which includes 850 restaurants and employs 62,000 people. This is due in large part to the Kremlin's brutal war of aggression on Ukraine. On the business side of things, officials say the move is not expected to change the company's forecast of adding a net 1,300 restaurants this year. Moving to China now, where authorities say most of Shanghai has stopped the spread of the coronavirus in the community, and fewer than 1 million people remain under strict lockdown. China's largest city is moving toward reopening as economic data showed the gloomy impact of China's zero-COVID policy. Officials say the outbreak was under effective control, with 15 out of Shanghai's 16 districts eliminating virus transmission among people not already in quarantine. All right, well, meanwhile, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the death toll from COVID-19 has reached 1 million. Drug maker Pfizer is estimating the death toll would have been much higher without its vaccine. It estimates that nearly 690,000 hospitalizations, 110,000 deaths, and 8.7 million symptomatic cases were prevented last year alone. Pfizer is also estimating its vaccine led to savings of $30 billion in healthcare costs and $40 billion in productivity. All right, staying in the U.S., where Starbucks is the latest company to detail its benefits on abortion care. This comes after a leaked draft of a Supreme Court opinion indicated that it will abolish a nationwide right to abortion. The coffee chain says it will now reimburse employees and their dependents for eligible travel expenses when accessing abortion or gender-affirming procedures. This would be when those services are not available within 160 kilometers of a worker's home. The employees must be enrolled in the Starbucks healthcare plan. Earlier this month, Tesla said it would cover travel costs for employees seeking out-of-state abortions. A recently published study out of Japan shows that it's never too late to adapt healthier habits, and doing so can add years to your life even in your 80s. This study was conducted by the Japan Collaborate Cohort Study Group and published in Age and Aging. It found that healthy habits adopted over time can have a marked effect on a person's lifespan. Healthy behaviors such as reduced drinking, not smoking, maintaining a healthy body weight, and getting more sleep produce the greatest results. Adopting these habits increased longevity in healthy 40-year-olds by 6 years. These results were even more prominent for those in their 80s. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily.